As we begin our service, would you please take a moment to make sure that your electronic devices are silenced so as not to disturb the quality of this time that we have together. Thank you. This extraordinary sanctuary, created to sustain and nourish the life of the Spirit, was very important to Marty Yarington. And today, as family members and friends, we are privileged to gather here to celebrate, to honor, and to remember her life and spirit. On behalf of the family, I'd like to thank you for your presence today. Even though the death of a loved one is ultimately something that must be attended to individually and alone, still there's nothing that can take the place of the support of a loving community of friends and neighbors and acquaintances who take the time to express their care and concern. Also, on behalf of the family, I'd like to invite you to a reception that will take place immediately after our service today in the social hall here at Fountain Street Church. The invocation for our service, requested by the family, are words that Marty heard many times attending Sunday services here, sitting as she did about 8 or 10 rows back on the right side of the sanctuary near the overhanging balcony. These words: "This is indeed a day which the Lord has made. Let us then rejoice in it and be glad, and let us count our many, many blessings. Let us be grateful for the incredible gift of life, for the capacity to see, to feel, to hear, and to understand. And let us then be especially grateful for the ties of love, which bind us together, giving dignity, meaning, worth, and joy to all our days." We continue our service by lighting a candle of remembrance for Marty, and representing the family are Marty's beloved grandchildren, Lexi and Molly McGuigan, and they will come forward at this time to light that. They'll light it after we together recite the words that you'll find in your order of service. So would you please turn to your order of service, to the words that are printed under the heading Lighting of Candle of Remembrance. And now would you please join with me, saying in unison, "She goes free of the earth, grown lighter than breath. She is set free in our remembering. She is hidden among all that is and cannot be lost. We light this candle in grateful remembrance." In preparing for this service for my dear friend Marty Yarington, I looked at my notes from a memorial service for Marty's second husband, Steve Moorhead, who was also a very dear friend of mine. Steve died abruptly, shockingly to us, of a heart attack in May of 2001. He was riding an exercise bicycle at an athletics center here in Grand Rapids. He died, this was less than 6 months after he and Marty were married, though they had been very good friends for a number of years. Steve's favorite poem was Tennyson's Ulysses. "I cannot rest from travel. I will drink life to the lees," is how that poem begins. And then it concludes with, "Strong in will to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. Marty shared this drive and exuberance for life with Steve. It perhaps was one of the things that brought them together. Both of them would tenaciously, excessively, some might say, push beyond normal human boundaries and expectations. In Marty's case, for example, she would participate in these 24-hour bicycle marathons. And she was joined in the early 90s, 91 and 92, by her son, John, in a mother-son 24-hour marathon. They won it both years, going in 24 hours together, their combined miles, well over 600 miles. And John tells me he went 460 of those miles. And John, I kind of wonder where you got that drive from. And then also, each year, Marty celebrated the birthdays of her grandchildren who just lit the candle of remembrance. She celebrated it by driving usually straight through from Grand Rapids to Connecticut, once in October, once in May. She was packed and ready to go again just a few short weeks ago when she went to the doctor and her illness was discovered. Or I think of Marty's keeping in touch with a number of her students from grade school, 3rd and 4th grade, decades after she had taught them, and we will hear from one of those students later this morning. So the idea of stopping living, the idea of dying, was not really part of Marty's mental picture. Because I could not stop for death, she kindly stopped for me, says the poet Emily Dickinson. And indeed, finally, very near the end, Marty accepted the carriage ride of which Emily Dickinson spoke in that poem, that carriage ride of death. She accepted the ride at the end, saying, "It's good, it's okay, it is as it should be." Marty loved to collect poems and sayings relating to how to live one's life. One of those poems was titled, "Let Evening Come." Now, in its origin, this poem, which is written by Jane Kenyon, who suffered greatly from depression, this poem originally was a literal call for evening to come to relieve her suffering. But, of course, its meaning and import has often been appropriately expanded to apply not just to the coming of the darkness of evening, but of surrendering to the unknown darkness of death. And Mary Oliver termed it that cottage of darkness. Here's Jane Kenyon's poem, "Let Evening Come." Let the light of late afternoon shine through chinks in the barn, moving up the bales as the sun moves down. Let the cricket take up chafing as a woman takes up her needles and her yarn. Let evening come. Let dew collect on the hoe abandoned in long grass. Let the stars appear and the moon disclose her silver horn. Let the fox go back to its sandy den. Let the wind die down. Let the shed go black inside. Let evening come. To the bottle in the ditch, to the scoop in the oats, to air in the lung. Let evening come. Let it come as it will. And don't be afraid. God does not leave us comfortless. So let evening come. In Marty's collection of poems, there is one in which the poet wonders what death, that cottage of darkness, will be like. The poem is titled, "I Wonder If I Will Miss the Moss." I wonder if I will miss the moss. And I read it thinking of Marty. I think of her love of exploring questions without the necessity of having some final or fixed answer. The poem is written by Jane Mead. It's taken from an issue that she found in the New Yorker magazine. I wonder if I will miss the moss after I fly off, as much as I miss it now just thinking about leaving. There were stones of many colors. There were sticks holding both lichen and moss. There were red gates with old hand-forged hardware. There were fields of dry grass smelling of first rain, then of new mud. There was mud. And there was the walking. All the beautiful walking. And it alone filled me. The smells, the scratchy grass heads, all the sleeping under bushes, once waking to vultures above, peering down with their bent heads the way they do, caricatures of interest and curiosity. Once to a lizard, once to a kangaroo rat, once to a rat. They did not say I belonged to them, but I did. Whenever the experiment on and of my life begins to draw to a close, I'll go back to the place that held me and be held. It's okay. I think I did what I could. I think I sang some. I think I held my hand out. And certainly, Marty Yarington held her hand out. Included in today's program is one of Emily Dickinson's condensed poems. If I can stop one heart from breaking, I shall not live in vain. If I can ease one life the aching, or cool one pain, or help one fainting robin unto his nest again, I shall not live in vain. Those of you who knew Marty knew that she was intent on preventing hearts from breaking. So empathetic, so affirming, so tender with those in pain and distress, and so interested to see others thrive. In Marty's collection of poems and writings, there are a number of the most well-known of Mary Oliver's poems. She's a contemporary American poet. She died in 2019. For my concluding reading, however, I'm going to read a different Mary Oliver poem. It's one that I think, actually it's one that I would love to have shared with Marty. I think she would include it in her collection. It reminds me, I can almost hear her voice in parts of this poem. It's titled, "Long Afternoon at the Edge of Little Sister Pond." As for life, I'm humbled. I'm without words sufficient to say how it has been hard as flint and soft as a spring pond. Both of these, and over and over. And long, pale afternoons besides. And so many mysteries, beautiful as eggs in a nest, still unhatched, though warm and watched over by something I have never seen, a tree angel perhaps, or a ghost of holiness. Every day I walk out into the world to be dazzled, then to be reflective. It suffices. It is all comfort, along with human love, dog love, water love, little serpent love, sunburst love, or love for that smallest of birds flying among the scarlet flowers. There is hardly time to think about stopping and lying down at last to the long afterlife, to the tenderness yet to come, when time will brim over the singular pond and become forever. And we will pretend to melt away into the leaves. As for death, I can't wait to be the hummingbird. Can you? An important hymn to Marty was one that was sung at the women's groups that she was a part of. It's the hymn Spirit of Life. It's number 123 in the gray-colored hymnals. You'll find those in the seat pocket in front of you. Marilyn Osenchuk, our organist for the service. And Marilyn, I'm so pleased that you could be here today. Thank you so much. So Marilyn is going to play, it's a single verse hymn. She's going to play it through once, and then we will sing the single verse. And you can remain seated during the playing and singing of this hymn. Marilyn? We will now honor Marty's memory with reminiscences by family members and friends, and we're going to begin with family member Melissa Moore. Melissa?
Unless you came here today supporting a loved one and didn't know Marty very well, in which case, thank you, and I'm sorry. I'm sure you came because you wanted to honor your very special relationship. Like me, I'm sure you had a special relationship with Marty. We shared a love of animals, reading, cooking, feminism, a sense that social justice could be practiced at a very personal level. Marty helped me realize that that's a lot about forgiving. I'm still working on that quite a bit, but I'll miss the way that she could hear you out, listen to your side of the story, find where you agreed, chart her own course, disagree, but still believe in you. She might think that you could make some very, very bad choices. I don't think Marty would have ever believed you were a bad person. She was pretty special in showing this unconditional love for people. I get to tell you a little bit about my special relationship with Marty because she put a ring on it. I was very fortunate. It was touch and go for a while. As you may know, mistakes were made. Might have been a couple decades in the making, but I think I knew Marty for more than 40 years. She was my stepmother for 5 months and 3 weeks in 2001. Thank goodness. I think that is another thing that was special between us and kept us connected across the decades since. She was the stepmother that my mother, Martha, approved as early as the 1980s. Marty knew both of my sets of grandparents from my mother's and my father's side, staying with us on family vacations. She was the kids' co-conspirator sometimes, and when my father's mother passed away in 1999, she was the one who helped us negotiate that transition of life, encouraging us to hang on to that special Wedgwood china pattern that the second cousin twice removed that we had never met wanted. She loved family. She loved tradition if it was good. Her love for Christmas was, of course, legendary, and her collection of special Spode tableware for Christmas, apparently inexhaustible. But she knew that sharing those traditions was what made your relationship special, which helped you know how special you were to her. She was integral to a social context that I was fortunate to be a part of, and yet so much of our time in the last few decades were spent just the two of us. Unless you count, of course, the inevitability of running into friends if you were trying to have lunch in Grand Rapids, and a somewhat odd inevitability for me of running into the Bodies at her house when I happened to stop by. I confess that although I was terrified of what was to come, I was actually looking forward to sharing Marty's journey with chemo. In the next year or so, I had a little Feeling Great in 28 slogan all ready to go. Never got a chance to use it. She knew very well how terrifying that journey would be, and yet was willing to share it with me. I lived in North Carolina while her mother and aunt, Peggy, spent the last of their days. So she had an understanding of what that meant and what it would take. And it was just something else that brought us together. I never would have known about the Sandhills region in North Carolina if I hadn't had to look for a place to meet up as she was driving in and out of the state. Again, those marathon drives. She was always ready to be part of my flights into or out of Grand Rapids. She didn't seem to find it inconvenient to pick me up at 11 p.m. or let me spend the night to get a flight out at 6 a.m. How else would I have been able to call her on the spur of the moment on my way to Lake Michigan with a car full of kids, no towels? Happened to see, do you happen to be home, Marty? And have, I don't know, 5 towels I could borrow? But of course she did. She was there. She had the towels ready for us and some snacks to go, which also I hadn't brought. And of course, when I stopped by on the way back to drop them off, she had homemade pizza ready and a whole party. So that sounds sweet. It is sweet. It's a very sweet memory. And a lot of people who knew Marty and was part of this circle have mentioned what a sweet person she was. But I'll miss her saltiness. I'll miss her pepper. And I'll have to say she had more than a little vinegar in her too, especially if you weren't careful with that Spode Christmas pattern. It just helped us keep on the straight and narrow, honoring those special traditions. She certainly has added so much sweetness to my life that I hope to carry with me forever in her honor, and especially as I do those random acts of kindness that she's called on us all to remember her by. So thank you for being here.
A cousin of Marty's, Jane Wells, has written a reminiscence of Marty, which I will read now on her behalf. Jane writes, Marty and I were the daughters of 2 sisters, which in my mind made us more than cousins. She was the older one, who I so admired as a kid and who became a dear friend as we grew up. We shared the deeply rooted family tradition of gathering for Thanksgiving and kept that tradition for many years with our growing families. Our kids were always excited at the prospect of a visit with Marty. She always listened, gave her full attention, and cared. And in that act, she taught us each an important lesson, and we all loved her for it. Also representing the family are Marty's brother Fred Cox and cousin Jeff Barron. And Fred, could you please come forward? And I'm going to go sit down there because I can't hear anything back there. So.
This is an amazing setting you got here, and I'm honored to be here. My older sister, I knew her for 83 years, and we had a close relationship for all those years. And I was told to keep this fairly short, and I would say that I won the lottery with Marty. She got the short end of the stick. There's no doubt about it. But I'll keep this very short. One little story I'll tell you is that when we were young, we used to travel with our folks from the Catskills in New York to our home in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And as we drove the narrow roads in the Catskills, my folks would always stop in front of this wonderful old barn made out of solid stone with a red cupola roof. And they would kiss. He'd stop the car. We'd be in the back seat. Marty would look at me and say, "What's going on, Fred?" I said, "I don't know." As we went through our lives, got older, she would bring up that same question to me. What were they doing? I said, "Marty, that's where you were conceived." In the summer of 1937. That's where you came from. So a little later on, Marty would come and visit us, either in Florida or Arizona or New Hampshire, and she'd drive her Toyota car that had like 250,000 miles on it. And whenever she came to visit, I would go out and I'd wash it and wax it. And she couldn't believe that I would do that for her every time she came to visit. Well, as years went by, she started to show up more often. And I could never figure out whether it's because she wanted to get her car clean and waxed or that she loved her brother. I could never figure that out. And I'd end with saying that there are a number of us that grew up with our home in Shandaken, New York. It was the heart of our family. And we would spend Thanksgivings there, and we're really a pure Norman Rockwell family. No agendas, no airs, and it was all about love and being together as a family. And being here in this unbelievable venue. I've never seen anything like this. For those of you who are from this town, this is unbelievable. And I thank you for your time.
Wow, this is spectacular to see it from this vantage point. This is truly a celebration of life, no doubt. She was beautiful on so many levels. And it's my honor to honor her today. Let's begin with the Word of God. This is from Galatians 5:22 through 25. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. And those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. If we live by the Spirit, let us also walk by the Spirit. Marty did that. Let's break this down a little bit for her. Let's talk about love. Marty loved her family so much. She just loved every one of you on so many levels. Not only her immediate family, but her extended family. And her friends, they're here. Her students. I don't know a person that just loved people and then in turn loved life like Marty. That's Marty. Let's talk about peace. Let's talk about joy. What a radiant smile she had. She had an infectious laughter, too. And her loving personality blessed everyone in her presence. That's just the way she was. That's Marty. Let's talk about peace. She had a peaceful countenance about her. She's so level. And that came from her selfless love of others. No entanglements, no bitterness. She was calm. That's Marty. Let's talk about patience. Patience comes from the genuine love of which she had. And she had an abundance of it. That's Marty. Let's group kindness and goodness together. She'd drive, as Fred would say, thousands of miles to come see us in North Carolina. And she'd go to Hartford and wherever. We all knew that she was a world traveler, and she put a gazillion miles on her vehicle just to see us, just to see you. She was so giving of herself to visit us and to care for us. That was first and foremost in who she was. And she'd bring joy to everybody she was around. That's Marty. Let's talk about faithfulness. Her faith and positive outlook on life came from her sincere love and belief in God. That's Marty. And let's do gentleness. Right alongside of her kindness and goodness came her gentleness. Always loving on others and caring for others, because her heart was so pure with love. That's Marty. Last but not least, self-control. She looked after herself. She loved physical exercise, quality food. She liked magnets. And she loved riding bikes. Sidebar. One time I heard that she was riding down the road on her typical biking journey. And she was going down a steep hill, and a truck was approaching from this coming toward her. And the truck was beeping, and the guy was hollering, and beeping the horn. And Marty was going, what's going on? Well, it so happened that with that wind, it blew her top off to here. And two things got exposed. I had to share that. It's a beautiful. You remember that, John? Oh, me. Let me read this one more time, ladies and gentlemen, from Galatians. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control, against which no such thing is. Against such things there is no law. What an honor and a privilege it is for me to do this for Marty's sake. Rabbit, rabbit.
So our concluding reminiscences are by Linda Q, and she is a former student of Marty's. And then after that, a long-time and dear friend, Jan Mann, will speak. So Linda?
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me the honor of reflecting on Mrs. Yarington's legacy as a teacher. Mrs. Yarington, which is how I will forever know her, was my 4th grade teacher at Ada Elementary School, just east of here in Ada, Michigan. I have to admit, I don't remember a lot about 4th grade, at least not a lot of the math or spelling or science, and I'm sure Mrs. Y spent hours and hours lesson planning. But I am delighted to share with you 4 more important and invaluable lessons. Starting with the fact that Mrs. Y introduced us to Ghost, who's a national hero. He celebrates his birthday every Friday the 13th. She acquainted us with Snake, who is a very wise, very talented, very intelligent, colorful stuffed animal who lived on top of the bathroom in our classroom at Ada, and to whom we could write whenever we needed encouragement, and who always responded with sage advice and always managed to make us feel better. 2 guesses who that was in the end. She taught us to love reading and writing. She gave each of us a journal and thoughtfully annotated our entries. She encouraged creativity and self-expression, personally sewing a pillow for each of us, on which we then painted our favorite hobbies. She cultivated friendship and positivity. On our birthdays, we received cards from all of our classmates who would write happy adjectives to describe us using the letters of our name. My last name starts with Q, so that was a tough one for people. And of course, she taught us the life-changing magic of Rabbit Rabbit. I'm sure I don't have to explain this concept to anyone here, but as technology advanced, I, for one, did question whether it's okay to send a text message or an email in the morning before saying Rabbit Rabbit. And so, of course, I asked her. And I happily share with all of you that direct from the definitive source herself, it's okay to send that text or that email, as long as you say Rabbit Rabbit out loud. So having cleared that up, I love the thought, actually, that all of us on the 1st of every month, no matter where we are in the world, will collectively remember Mrs. Yarington through the legacy of Rabbit Rabbit. You know, the years seem so long when you're 8 years old. Life seems like a really long time. But even at that young age, I and so many of my peers knew that Mrs. Yarington was someone who we would cherish forever. It was Maya Angelou who said that people will forget what you said, they will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. My memory of Mrs. Yarington, as I'm sure so many of yours are, is the singular, extraordinary way that she made you feel supported, believed in, that at 8 years old you could achieve your wildest dreams because she was behind you, she supported you, she opened your eyes to possibility and opportunity and everything that was bright in the world. My classmates from that year, many of whom are still close friends almost 30 years later, including Sarah and Natalie, who are sitting here, we've been reminiscing about our time with Mrs. Y. We remember her selfless generosity, her indefatigable spirit, her absolute warmth of character and personality. She had the ability to make each of us feel valued, beloved, and so unique. She paid us immense attention. She knew our parents, our siblings, what we loved, and what made us tick. As you've heard in recent years, she reconnected with so many of us, sending us drawings, letters, photos, time from our time in her classroom and beyond. For example, in 5th grade, Natalie wrote to Mrs. Y, quote, "We like our teachers this year, but you're still the best." In 9th grade, I said, "Between you and me, 4th grade was still my favorite year." As high school seniors, Mrs. Y sent each of us the letters that we had written as 4th graders to our future selves. And we wrote back saying, "It is so exciting to hear from you. You made that year so fun for us." And as we continued to grow up and go on, she kept in touch, sending us messages of congratulations for all of life's milestones. And it's a true testament to her passion for teaching and her love of her students, which was so deeply reciprocated, that our friend Amanda summed it up best. She said, quote, "She was a legend." This past April, I, along with Sarah, had the incredible fortune of seeing Mrs. Yarington again, and perhaps beyond a few more white hairs, she was exactly as I remembered. The sharpness of her brilliant mind, her thoughtfulness, care, and concern, and what I will always remember, what has already been commented on, her extraordinary smile. I mean, is there anybody else who has a smile like hers? Her whole face lights up, every crinkle shows, and is just like the definition of a light being switched on in someone's face. I know she's still smiling, and I very humbly, on behalf of every student with the unbelievable fortune of being taught by her, salute this most formidable, incredible, and unforgettable educator. Thank you.
The time that we are given always seems so short for life, for celebration, for remembrances of a person such as Marty. It was ever thus and ever thus will be, but I'll try and speak of my most true and constant memories of Marty because I believe they will sustain me and remain with me. In hopes of voicing your memories too, I reread all of your posts from the last couple of weeks, and I found that we have much in common because Marty, way more than most people, was recognizable in her true and authentic self across this huge range of family and friends and students. And I turned to and reread Walt Whitman's poem, Song of Myself, because as I thought about Marty and what I wanted to say, that poem came to me in its earthy, vibrant, singular, universal voice, and it reminded me of how I felt with Marty, whether we were snowshoeing or biking or walking and talking, texting. She had that astonishing, vibrant heart, soul, and mind. She was an indoor and an outdoor friend, equally at home, tromping through the woods and sitting in her sun porch that she loved. She shared her love and her passion for more, always more. You'd finish some experience with her, and she would be, "Let's do that again." And as worn out as I usually was, I would say, "Yes, yes." She was never one to let go of any options. And up until the last minute, or until her frustrated friends, her family, forced her into a date and time and place of what we were going to do, it made it difficult to plan things, lunches, dinners, outings, jazz performances. But Marty opened me up, and most other people, to that world of opportunity She didn't like to be tied down. I can hear her saying, okay, Jan, I'll pencil that in. And I would say, ink? Maybe? She'd say, wait, something might come up. And she was never trying to dodge you or wait for a better offer. It was like, you might have something better to do than do this thing we talked about for 7 hours. So she was kind and compassionate, and she was available to listen whenever I or anyone wanted to share a joy, a happiness, a sorrow, political argument. She was available. In addition, though, Marty was one of the toughest people I knew. And she was, among other things, a feminist, a champion of the underdog, a tough negotiator, and an ardent gamer. Electronic games, board games, card games, athletic endeavors, it didn't matter. And interestingly, her favorite card game was called Spite and Malice, which was a part of Marty too, because she loved to win and often did win. And if she didn't win, she would argue about whether she had won or whether you had played fair or some other thing. She also shared her passions and would persist, whether I was interested or not. And can any of us forget her true belief and trust in things like the life-giving properties of kombucha, magnets, negative ion water machines, raw nuts, all things organic. And it must be said, when Marty trusted or believed in anything, she wanted all of us, her family, her friends, to get on board that train with her, because it was going to the right place. I ended up buying several items from her, and I believe that she was selling these things. I believe it would put an end to her efforts to convince me of the power in these items. Well, I was wrong. Very wrong. It only encouraged her. She could and would engage in a fierce and persistent direct and cross-exam of her dearest friends, and probably her family, too, at the drop of a hat. And, you know, I can hear her saying, Jan, wait, I want to talk about that, as I was attempting to derail her probing line of questioning. And maddeningly, she was a master of deflection when you tried to engage in that same kind of probing question, direct cross-exam of her. Now, let's talk about that smile. I know others have talked about it, but it contained multitudes. And I spent time with Marty when she was hospitalized after her first chemotherapy, and she was sleeping soundly in a hospital room, and I was sitting there with her. And I had the thought, she is a beautiful woman, inside and out, and so brave. And at that instant, it was as if she had heard what I was thinking, and her eyes flew open, and there was that radiant, amazing smile. And in that moment, she transported both of us to a place of light and love. It spoke volumes, because she didn't say a word, and I didn't either, of mornings we had kayaked on Reed's Lake, of the turtles and the herons that were our poem, and of the calm understanding and sea of love that she was encouraging me to go to with her. And she held me in that smile for a while and then said, I'm so glad you're here, and then closed her eyes and went back to sleep. And in the time of her own distress and difficulty, she was able to transcend the grim reality and take herself and me on that journey to a better place. And I want to conclude just by honoring and acknowledging the gravitational pull that Marty exerted on all of us. She loved nothing more than to bring together her family and her friends and her students with the other people that she loved by telling stories and anecdotes about them. It was as if I knew everyone here in this room, even if I met you only yesterday. We were connected through those stories. We were connected through her love. That love emanated from Marty to us and back again through Marty in an endless loop. It was her gift, her strength, and her unique song to the universe. I am grateful, as I know you all are, to live in the warmth of that universe with all of you. Namaste.
Let us be together in a prayer of gratitude for Marty's life. Eternally creative Spirit of life and love, we are grateful for all the things in our life that are good and true and beautiful. We're grateful for the qualities of Spirit that inform, strengthen, encourage, inspire, and give us faith, hope, and love. We are grateful this day for the life and spirit of Marty Yarington. We're grateful to have had the presence of such a loving person in our lives. And we're grateful for the many days of her life, for all that was given her to do. We're grateful for the qualities of her character and her personality, her varied interests, her inquiring mind, exuberant spirit, compassionate heart, her deep devotion to those she taught, and as well her unwavering support of immediate and extended family. We are also grateful for all those who were part of her life and for whom she was grateful. Grateful for all those in her life's journey who in any way opened her mind or deepened her affections or confirmed and strengthened her faith, her hope, and her love. And now we will remember with affection the qualities of her life and spirit as we were given to understand them. We pray that we will have the heart and the mind to treasure these our remembrances so that they may go on contributing to our growth in wisdom, understanding, and in loving kindness. Amen. Our service concludes with the singing of Amazing Grace. It's number 205 in your hymnal. And you are invited to stand as able and willing, and then again be seated for a spoken benediction and the playing of Charles Vidor's Toccata, after which the family will depart for a reception in the social hall to which all of you are invited. Amazing Grace, number 205. Please stand as you wish. Our closing words of benediction are from the preface to the book In the Time of Your Life by William Saroyan. And these are words that Marty always loved to hear and which certainly embodied her approach to living. In the time of your life, live, so that in that good time there should be no ugliness or death for yourself or for any life that your life touches. Seek goodness everywhere. When it is found, bring it out of its hiding place. Let it be free and unashamed. Discover in all things that which shines and is beyond corruption. Encourage virtue into whatever heart it may have been driven into secrecy and sorrow by the shame and terror of the world. In the time of your life, live, so that in that wondrous time you shall not add to the misery and sorrow of the world, but shall smile instead to its infinite delight and mystery.